Okay, we're going to get going. Basically, thank you all for joining today. We have this town hall so that Kamy, who is our president and owner of Illumination Lighting, can answer all the technical questions you may have. Some of you have put those questions when you registered, and they were great questions. So Kamy's got a list, and we're going to go through them. What might happen is we may not get through all the questions today. However, you can just send me off an email and we can make sure that we can get on a call just with you afterwards to answer your questions if they don't get answered today. For those of you who don't know Illumination Lighting that well, Kamy's been around in the industry for about 35 years. We are based in Montreal, Canada. We have a factory here in Montreal as well. And we also have overseas factories that we work with. We have an office in China with 8 employees. So they basically monitor all the projects that are going on in China and follow it from A to Z to make sure that the QA is done. And basically, without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Kamy. Kamy, I'm going to ask you the first question, and he'll answer it, and then we'll go from there. Welcome, Kamy. Question number 1. What are the preferred materials used in manufacturing custom lighting? What type of metals are used?
When it comes to raw material, we have a lot of choices of raw material to use, but primarily we work with 4 or 5 different raw materials, starting from steel, aluminum, brass, solid brass, or stainless steel. But our preferred choice of raw material is pretty much always steel, because it's easy to work with when we are working on welding, bending, soldering, sanding. It's much easier to work with. B, it provides a very solid structure. When you have everything put together, the structure is nice and solid. And of course, the best of the best is that it's the least expensive of all. So we always try to work with steel. And if you have to go to a little bit more non-corrosive material, then we jump into aluminum or stainless steel, depending on its application. But the choice of the material is always steel, and it's always been the steel.
Kamy, could you answer a question, please, here? What would you please explain using LED strip lighting versus conventional LED light bulbs and the applications for each?
Sure. Well, it's a great question. I mean, it's a nice topic. We can talk about it for a whole day, but I'm going to be brief as you asked. So we have many more questions to respond to. So conventional LED bulbs, as we all know, it has been in the market for quite some time, and it's been taken over, replaced by incandescent and fluorescent light bulbs for several years by now. And right now, pretty much they have replaced actually all the halogens, incandescent, fluorescents. They all come in different bases, different base sizes, and wattages, and color temperatures. So the conventional LED bulb has been really, it's been winning the game all the way because of its low consumption, longer lasting, and all the good things comes with it. Versus LED strip. LED strips are pretty much commonly used in linear and circular design concepts, whereby we require even lighting, even flow of lighting, and of course in tight spaces. So that's where we tend to use LED strips. And of course, we have to realize that most LED strips come in low voltages, meaning 12 volts or 24 volts. So that is when we tend to also have an axe, we have to also realize that there will be an LED driver because of low voltage. So if and when we design a linear or a concept that we require LED strip, we have to make sure we have enough room, sufficient room for the LED driver. Now, the LED driver could be fitted into a backplate, could be fitting into in the body of the fixture, or in a ceiling canopy. It all depends the size and the wattage of the driver we require.
Thank you, Kamy. Next question. What is the best
Julie?
metal that will withstand corrosion from salt sea air?
Okay. Well, when it comes to outdoor pictures, Julie, we typically think about non-ferrous materials. Non-ferrous materials meaning solid brass, aluminum, or stainless steel. These are the materials that really withstand the outdoor conditions. Now, throughout the years of experience and working with these materials, we have tend to understand that the solid brass and aluminum eventually will give in and will react to the salt air. So they'll become not corrosive, but they will leave some stains on the finish, which is not really. So then that means you have to refinish them. So the best material that we identified for outdoor conditions is stainless steel. So once you have that buffed and finished, it will last you as long as you want it to last, and it will not corrode. It will not have any finishing issues years from now. So that's what we recommend, to use a stainless steel if we can, and if the project can afford it.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, next question. Are there standard finish samples, or do all desired finishes require a control sample to match?
Us, all vendors, we have our own standard finishes. And some have more, some have less. Illumination Lighting has roughly about 50 different standard finishes. These are selected based upon years of going through projects, and we have picked up all the most commonly used and most popular colors. So we put together a series of finishes. I have a sample here with me. So it comes in like a ring set. They come in finishes with our logo in it, and they're roughly about 50 different finishes. Now, needless to say, I mean, being in custom, we are used to match custom colors, custom finishes. So there's not a problem. If we have to match a color that you do not see in a ring set, we can always have it matched up and set back for approval.
Okay, here's the next question. What role does weight play in manufacturing pendants or chandeliers? Are there lightweight substrates for large pendants? What precautions must be taken for installation?
As well. What we typically do, if we are involved at the project inception with the design team, we always discuss weights. We always discuss mounting points. And we always discuss if there are any ceiling limitations or challenges. So this should be discussed at the early stages, and so we can come up with some ideas, and we can reflect these changes into shop drawings. Once the shop drawings are done, I guess everything is discussed, and all the precautions has been taken before the production commences. And of course, if there are challenges with the ceiling conditions at the site, we can always switch raw material to a lighter material. For example, we've done a lot of ballroom fixtures whereby we've had issues with the ceiling's capacity. We switched from steel to aluminum. And that have done pretty much, we're talking about roughly about 50% in terms of weight reduction. So that has helped us immensely. We sometimes even use aluminum in conjunction with the stainless steel. And so that means the aluminum would get an inner structure, would hold all the structure beam, and then we apply the stainless steel depending on the finish we want on the face. But typically we tend to use aluminum all the way in order to reduce the weight and have less of issues with the weight issues at the job site. Even though if there is no issues, but we typically try to use aluminum to reduce the weight.
Thank you, Kamy. Next question. Would you please explain why it is necessary to know before manufacturing whether customer will require the fixture to be dimmable, and what is required? Does it cost more for a dimmable fixture?
Sure. It is important to understand and know if there's dimming requirements. Because typically if there is a driver, if you're using an LED, for example, with a driver in it, it makes a difference. The dimmable drivers are typically roughly 1.5 times larger than an ordinary driver, which is not dimmable. So it definitely make a difference in terms of the design. You may have to, if it's a wall sconce, you may have to enlarge the back plate. If it's a pendant, you may have to make sure that you have enough room within the body or within the canopy. and of course, enlarge the canopy size to fit the LED dimmable driver. The second factor is that it is the cost. The cost of dimmable driver, it's definitely much more, and it will impact the final pricing of the unit. So it's important for us to realize and understand if there is dimming required, and then we will, of course, provide code accordingly and discuss it with design team during the production and make sure the drawing is done accordingly.
What is the most common mistake people make when either writing custom lighting specifications or ordering the lighting?
It's typically it's a gray area. I would say probably mostly it would be the electrical section of the spec. Sometimes I understand totally the electrical part of the fixture, and that's where we or vendors come in handy. Or it's, I would say it's best to have an engineer or a lighting consultant in the team, so he or she will definitely assist with coming up with the proper information and writing the spec properly. It is important to specify the proper lamping, to specify the proper color temperature, and ensure if the fixture is to be dimmable and works with the driver, the dimming system and the building is compatible with the dimming driver we use in our fixtures. We've had issues in the past that we shipped the fixture was shipped to the site, and there was a compatibility issue. The system, the dimming system at the building was not compatible to the dimming driver. So that the owner was forced to replace the dimming driver, which was less expensive, to make sure that there will be communication for the both drivers and the dimming system. So it's really, really important that electrical part of the spec to be reviewed. I would say preferably by a lighting engineer, or we can be consulted with lighting manufacturer if they are capable and they are knowledgeable enough to review and ensure there will be a compatibility in terms of dimming systems and the building dimming system. So that is important. So that gray area would be the electrical part, I would say.
Would you please explain the number of J boxes required for installing custom pendants? Are you able to use one J box for 2 or 3 fixtures, or do you need individual J box for each fixtures?
Okay. Well, we prefer one J box per fixture. Regardless of the size of the fixture, we prefer one J box. Why? Because typically the J boxes are designed per load, and sometimes we cannot divide the wiring and divide the loads, and God knows how much load could go to each J box. So we would prefer one J box per fixture. And we prefer not to just mix them up together, because there will be, even when it gets to larger fixtures for public space, if they utilize two live, I'll call it live J box because there's power in it, 2 live J boxes, then there will be confusion as opposed to how much wire goes to what with J box. And when it comes to dimming, there will be some complications. So I would recommend one J box per fixture.
Is it always necessary to require samples before production?
If you're referring to guest room lighting, absolutely. It is always good to verify, to inspect, to look at the whole room package all together when it's lit and put together. It's important. The lighting levels in a room, it's extremely important for interior designers to review by the owner, make sure they're happy with the light levels. So we definitely recommend to order samples prior to mass production. Now, if you go to public space, of course, that's a different ballgame. And perhaps not if someone is concerned about the look of the fixture. What we do here, we provide 3D drawings or some sort of a cartoonish drawing that we can color them so you can see what it looks like. Or we could always build a quarter section, have it suspended in our factory, and we could, so what we've done in the past, we do video calls and then they will review the whole thing live, lit, and that would be the sample for a public space. But typically, we don't do a lot of samples of public spaces.
Next question. Is there a solution you have to streamline ordering attic stock?
Good question. I mean, it's always important, and we always do recommend ordering attic stock. Of course, ordering attic stock would be good when they're ordering mass production. That's when the cost saving comes to play. During the mass production, factory can provide adequate stock that we need at a very reasonable price, versus not ordering at the same time and then ordering 6 months or 4 months later, where the setup and the tooling has been taken off the machine, and then there will be minimum charges, there will be minimum quantities. So I would highly recommend to consider attic stock. And what we typically recommend is about 5%. That's what we recommend. It all depends what it is naturally, but typically 5% of the whatever is being ordered, it would be sufficient.
The importance of shop drawings. As a designer, what constitutes an accurate shop drawing, thus ensuring the manufacturer grasps the conceptual drawing correctly? What are the important details we as designers have to pay attention to when reviewing technical shop drawings?
Okay. Well, the technical shop drawings becomes eventually a Bible that is pretty much signed off and we all agreed upon before we get into production. So it is important for design team, interior designers, when they review shop drawings, make sure they pay attention to mounting points, weights, wattages, and sometimes voltages. Sometimes, I mean, we've had issues in the past that the voltage changed, and that makes a big difference, huge difference. If the voltage changed from 120 to 277, for example, the whole thing changes, the lamping changes, the wiring changes. So it's important to look at these important elements on the shop drawing, at the title block. I'm sure all vendors have title blocks, and if they don't, they should. And so we all have to pretty much refer to title blocks, make sure everything is noted, the weight of the fixture, whatever was it, but just again, we talked about the weight of the fixture a few minutes ago. It's important to verify the weight of the fixture and ensure the ceiling can take it. Voltage is number 2. And again, dimmability, make sure that the dimmings are there. Make sure everything is noted on the shop drawing before you sign off the drawings. Now, once the drawing is signed off, of course, everything goes into production, and it is much more difficult to make changes once the production has commenced and is already ongoing, or the fixture is ready at the site. It's very difficult to switch a voltage from 120 to 277 or vice versa. So it's important to verify all the notes that you have on your spec compared to the notes shown on the shop drawing, and finishes, whatever is approved, make sure all the notes are noted and confirmed. And then we can go into production. So it's important both of us have to have a sign-off drawings whereby we can work on, and that would be pretty much, we call it the Bible as we go into production for any particular project.
Well said, Kamy. Thank you. Next question. Would you please explain the difference between wet label and marine grade applications? Also, the difference between using damp label and wet label.
The wet label, pretty much, as we all know, it's wet label. It's a unit that is exposed to all the outside elements. It's rained into. Basically, it has to be waterproofed. So typically, whatever fixture or sconce receives the wet label UL approval or ETL, it goes through rigorous tests, water test, rain test, and ensure it has all kinds of sealants, ensure there's no water getting into it, and of course, ensure the unit is manufactured with non-corrosive or non-ferrous material, meaning aluminum, stainless steel, or brass, not steel. So that's important. But when it goes through UL or ETL, they mostly look into the electrical aspect of the whole thing, make sure the sockets, the wires, the drivers, everything meets the electrical outside codes. And then it will go on phase 2, which will go through at least a day of rain test. And through all this process, so that's takes about, it might be, I'll say, 4 or 5 days of testing. That's when they approve and they go through the wet. So that's called the wet test, and that's when you'll have the wet test approval, the sign off, and the stamping. The stamping is very expensive. It's very pricey. That's why not everyone has a wet test, wet UL or wet ETL, because it's quite pricey. And the quantities we require at the time for outdoor units, if they're small quantities, sometimes is not even warrants for anyone to go into the process of wet test, wet UL test, or wet ETL test. So it is quite pricey. Now versus damp label, which is pretty much, it's a unit that is under a shelter. Again, it is manufactured with the water, with the outdoor sockets, with the aluminum or non-ferrous material that it does not rust. But again, it's not exposed to rain. It does not require proper sealants or gasketing. So it definitely falls in to an indoor label, but it has to have the non-ferrous material, and also the finishing and everything has to be made for outdoor conditions. So that would be the damp versus wet. Pretty much is the cost of approval, the UL approval or ETL approval, and the testing that goes through for a wet test that we do not go through with damp label.
Next question I have is there a rule of thumb when sizing fixtures to rooms?
It's a tough question. It's a tough question. It's always depending on design themes and the ideas, concepts. What I've seen throughout years that I've worked doing business in lighting, it's typically what I've seen. Again, maybe wrong in that respect, but roughly about 25 to 30% of the area that the fixture will occupy in any room. That's what we've seen as a rule of thumb. But again, designs could change. I mean, design themes could come in, and you may have an idea with a larger fixture and making a statement with a larger unit components, or you may want to do a smaller fixture. Again, it all depends on the themes, but I would say roughly about 20-25% would be the rule of thumb.
What are the pros and cons in using wood in manufacturing of custom fixtures? Are there alternatives?
Yes. Okay. So on the wood, we try to shy away from wood because sometimes if we're working on small public space units that they require wood turnings or what have you, if the wood is not properly kiln dry, that's the term called kiln dry. That's when they pretty much dry up the wood, make sure the wood is not moving anymore. Because if the wood is made of a large, thick piece of wood, the wood is still moving. Even while the whole thing is done, it's turned, it's finished, and the wood inside of the wood is still it's progressing, it's moving. So you tend to possibly have some movement, some cracks, and some surface defects after a while. So we tend not to try. I mean, if there's a large quantity of wood, it's okay. It will go through proper kiln dry process, and then of course they would add a sealer to it. That's when you can be sure that everything would be nice and the wood is kind of done and fixed, is not moving. But generally, if for a small quantity runs, we would suggest to go with an alternative solution, which is called hydro painting. I do have a sample to show you here, if I may. This is a sample of a hydro paint. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's you can see it. I put a light in here. This is a piece of wood, so you can hear it. It is a piece of wood, a piece of steel, but it's finished in hydro painting. You can see everything is done to the core. Everything is finished, and really from far, if you're not be able to touch it, it looks like a wood. And so this is what we recommend. Lately, we use a lot of hydro paint on steel, and it does a phenomenal job. It does not scratch. It looks like a real wood. And of course, we have come up with some of our own standard finishes, which again, the finish could be altered. We could have customized wood finishes that you may have different grains or what have you, different colors. So these are a little bit of, I'm just putting in front of so you can see that these are customized wood finishes that we've come up with. Maybe I can just change that. You can see, so these are actual metal. These are applied on metal. And you see the core, you can see the wood nut in here, you can see the wood grains, and really it's, the finishing is phenomenal. And we've supplied a lot of these finishes to our customers, and they're quite happy with it because wood requires a lot of maintenance, as you all know. I mean, wood, you have to maintain it every 4 or 5 months. You have to apply some sort of sealer, cleaner, and of course, if it gets a scratch, it gets chipped. It's wood. It can happen. But metal, something like this, it would not damage. I mean, yes, it's nice and solid, but the finish is still great. And we can always send you more pictures via email. You can see for yourself. And I would suggest that if you have time, go through Google and then ask for hydro painting. You see the process, how it's done, and it's really done well. And it's really a great alternative to actual wood. And of course, it would be the price factor too. If there's a quantity involved, this would be much less expensive than wood.
Are LED lights considered green technology? Do they reduce CO2 emissions?
Absolutely. There have been a lot of studies, and it definitely saves a lot of CO2s. And by utilizing LEDs all the way, I have looked at a few studies, and you are saving quite a bit of gas emission, green gas emission. And it has been noted that, you know, if we all going to hopefully use this technology and all the way through, hopefully we get rid of some of this pollution that we're faced with right now. So definitely it does help, but it all depends on all of us to make sure we follow the guidelines and rules that are put on by the government. So I think it's definitely a great direction.
Thank you, Kamy. That's I think it's critical for the whole planet, basically. Next question: how critical is color of the light source?
It is subjective, Julie. It is subjective. It is at times. I mean, everybody pretty much. I think right now the most popular color temperature that we've been using is 2700K, which is very close to incandescent. So anywhere between 2700 to 3000 Kelvin has been the most popular, and that's what they're being utilized in the guest room lighting. As we get into a public space, the lighting changes. Where you have less of an outdoor light assistance, our clients tend to go more towards 3000, 3500 Kelvin, which is a wider color. So it varies. But from what I can tell you, what we've seen, it is important to have a natural color close to incandescent, which is 2700K for guest room lighting. And bathrooms are going to 3000K, 3000, 3005 Kelvin. And same thing for corridors and public space. So it varies where the lighting lands and what the project is about. So it all depends.
How much light do you need? Is there an equation to use in determining this?
This is really, it's a good question, but that's what I was just saying, going back to my previous discussion. It's always good to have a lighting engineer on board. It is difficult for any vendor or manufacturer to decipher as to how much light anyone or any particular room would need. It all depends on the theme, depends on the design. And it's always good to have a lighting engineer on board to understand and come up with the guideline as to how much light a typical room or a corridor will require. So it's really is not for us to say what we need. We can always come up with an idea, but again, we're not at the site. For example, corridors, it all depends how far apart the sconces are, and that's how an engineer can verify in a corridor how much light you need. Are they 4 feet apart? Are they 8 feet apart? 12 feet apart? It all depends on the site condition. Room is the same thing. It all depends, you know, what kind of furniture you have at the room. I've been at the several, guest room, part of the prototype rooms. Sometimes rooms are too dark because the walls are too dark, and so therefore lights look too dark, or sometimes not enough windows, or it all depends on so many factors. So I always say I'll try to pass on the information to the lighting engineer and the interior designers. They can decide on how much light they need in a typical room or a corridor.
Thank you, Kamy. Great answer. Here's an interesting question as well. Why does there seem to be flickering issues using a dimmer and LED lighting?
Certain LED bulbs, especially if you go to conventional light bulbs we just talked about earlier, some of them are not dimmable. And therefore, it's always important to look at the package or look at the brand name and what are they specifying. Most of them are nowadays are dimmable. The flickering problem used to be an issue at the beginning, maybe a couple of years ago, but less and less it's happening because more conventional LED bulbs are becoming like dimmable, and they're working with pretty much most of the conventional dimming systems on the wall. We call them triac dimmer. Triac dimmer is what's on the wall. Pretty much, it's not a dimming system. It's a little rotary piece, and or like a little button goes up and down. So that's called the triac dimmer. And most of the bulbs nowadays do work with a triac dimmer, especially LED bulbs. So that I think the issue should be pretty much gone or very limited at this time.
What are the limitations and cost increases in creating with lighting materials and metals that are not the common tube steel, such as cast, forged, hammered, or plastered and similar?
I'd say it starts with cost, the budget. If the budget allows, I mean, anybody can do anything. I mean, if you have to create toolings, make new toolings, new molds, it all depends on cost and quantities in the economy. So if you need two of a type and there's a budget for it, anything can be done. But if you need two of a kind with a low budget, naturally, I mean, it's going to be tight, because if you open a castings, zinc castings or brass castings, or even resin casting, the cost of toolings would be amortized to two or three or one. So that's why it becomes expensive. And we always try to, it all depends on the requirements. If the design is a must, and it's a must and the money's there, not an issue. But that's why the prices have become too high, because of the covering. They have to amortize the tooling cost, mold cost into a smaller quantity. And that's what these are the limitations. Otherwise, anything can be done, and we do have resources to get it done. It's just a matter of costing.
Finally, we have a question here for you to, what do you see as the top 3 trends in custom lighting for the coming year?
It's been a little mixed, really. It's a good question. What we've seen a lot in terms of inquiries, a lot of natural products, a lot of organic products that are hanging off of light fixtures, and so it's kind of a mixed bag. Sometimes we see a lot of certain months we see a lot of fabrics, a lot of fabric shades, large fabric shades. But recently we've seen a lot of natural products or simulation in resin that looks very much organic feel. A lot of blown glass that are hanging off fixtures. We have a lot of, nowadays in fact, we have a lot of orders with a lot of hanging organic ornamental glass or resin pieces off fixtures that are pretty nice. But it's a new approach, I'd say, new norm, and it's been the trend lately.
Okay, we have one last question here, and maybe you could just spend a little bit of time on it. We had a designer ask about if you could talk a little bit more about backlit mirrors and the different types and what you're seeing in the marketplace today and what we're making.
Okay. Well, as you all know, we do manufacture backlit mirrors, not as the main line, but we do have resources and great prices. Backlit mirrors could vary from one to another, and we can have frameless mirrors. We can have frame mirrors with aluminum framing all around. Most of our, I'd say all of our mirrors are pretty much fabricated with with aluminum backing, and the substrate would be all steel, powder coated steel, which is an internal structure. And LEDs could go all around, let's say all around the frame if you want. It all depends on your requirements. We can have LEDs only on the sides, and we've done some of the electrical luminaire mirrors with the night lights, which is at the bottom of the mirror. So that goes on a different circuit. So the mirror goes on and off, and you have a secondary circuit at, I'd say probably 5-watt LED that goes on or turns on a different circuit as a night light. So that was one of the latest products we did recently, which was I thought it quite interesting. The other one we've done, what I just have talked about, is pretty much forward lighting. We also have done backwashed. So we've done where the light is on the inside of the mirror, that lights up the frosted areas, and then you also have light on the exterior that washes, is called the wall wash. So we've done wall washes that turns on the wall, but pretty much lights up the wall very softly as a night light, or as you want it to be the mood lighting. And so again, with 2 different circuits, one will light up the mirror and the other will light up the wall wash. You call it wall wash. So we've done quite a few different iterations of different types of mirrors and different sizes, naturally. Not limited to sizes. We could do a lot of different sizes, and it all depends on the requirements.
Okay, I'm going to open up the floor, Kamy. We've got about another 10 minutes, and we've gone through all the questions that people have sent in. So I'm going to unmute our guests, and if anyone has a question, you're welcome to ask Kamy.
Hey, Kamy, question for you. With the hydro paint that you were talking about, can you custom color that in any like laminate or wood stain that we want you to match?
Absolutely, Brent. By the way, good to see you. So absolutely, what we've done here, it's like this was a custom color, by the way. And Brent, if you have time, you can Google it down. You can see how it's done. So it's like a thin film of coating with different colors that you require. They put them in a bath, and this dipped into a bath, and that coating color goes onto the metal, but electrostatic. So yeah, I mean, it could definitely. There'll be charge of that film that we have to purchase to match as your color. But absolutely. And then we've done quite a bit. In fact, as you may know, we do all the courtyards for Marriott, and all Marriott courtyard public space, they're all hydro painted. So we're doing in massive quantities of hydro paint finishing for Marriott courtyard. All the new courtyard 2020 program. Yeah.
Great.
I can send you some pictures later on.
And then my other question, when you're talking about LEDs and the dimming capabilities of LED lights, we typically hear or often hear a humming that comes from the fixture. What would be causing that? Any idea?
That would be I would say that's caused by the brand they're using. We typically use Lutron dimmable drivers, which are extremely happy with and have never had an issue. They're also magnetic, Brent. There's a brand called Magnitude. Magnitude LED drivers, they're magnetic and electronic. If you use magnetic, you tend to get that humming noise. But the electronics would not have that, should not have that. Yeah. So please make sure you always specify the electronic driver versus magnetic, because there are still some choice of magnetic drivers. This is to cut costs, but at the end of the day, you hear the noise.
I'd like to ask a question about California and Title 24, but not only because of California, but because sometimes these requirements end up going into everywhere else. And so are there specific things that are required here in my state?
Good question. The Title 24, it goes through a certain approval process. So what we deal with, Leslie, is mostly through the lamping that we have to deal with for Title 24, not the fixture. So the light bulbs that we purchase for projects in your area has to have the Title 24 approval, stamp of approval. It goes through some rigorous choice of lampings, light bulbs, and the light bulbs go through several age testing. So they want to make sure it will withstand the age testing of, let's say, 10,000 hours. So it goes through several tests before it gets the Title 24 stamp of approval. And of course, the Title 24 used to be, again, has changed since the LED came along, used to be strictly for pin-based light bulbs, if you remember. They were trying to prevent people from using regular incandescent
Now.
bulbs. So nowadays they have pretty much lowered that little requirement so they can accept any LED bulb with the screw base, because LEDs are all low volt, low wattage, low consumption. But they still have to go to a rigorous test of age testing to make sure it meets the codes that they require in terms of number of hours it can perform.
Okay, and is there something new about the bulb having to be included with the fixture when it ships? That's something new that I just started hearing, and is that to keep people from putting incandescents in there or something, or?
It is indeed. It is indeed. It applies to pretty much, it used to apply to custom lighting as well, but typically it definitely applies to retail for sure. Everybody has to buy their own, the bulbs, it comes in the box. And what we've done in the past, that we would buy it from a local light bulb manufacturer or whoever has got the Title 24 light bulbs. So it would go along with the shipment when the shipment is received. But yes, we have to supply the light bulbs that goes along with the fixture.
Okay, thank you.
And I want to thank you all for coming and being here today. If we can't be in person, at least I can see all your faces. And I hope you had a very informative hour-long session with Kamy. Thank you.
So, thanks, Kamy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Great idea.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.